I sat quietly at the long banquet table, right beside my 7-year-old grandson, at my daughter's second wedding. Suddenly, he clutched my hand so tightly that I nearly dropped my fork. His voice trembled as he whispered, "Nana, I want to leave right now." I leaned closer and asked softly, "What's wrong, darling?" His little shoulders shook as he whispered again, "Nana, you didn't look under the table, did you?" I slowly lowered my gaze, and my heart froze. Without a word, I took his tiny hand, and together, we rose in silence. The grand ballroom in Riverside Manor shimmered under the glow of chandeliers and candles. I sat there with my grandson, the one piece of joy that kept me breathing. It was my son Daniel's wedding day, his second marriage, this time to a woman named Cassandra. Little Noah sat beside me, rolling his red toy car across the spotless linen tablecloth, as though he lived in a world far away. From all the clinking glasses and cheerful chatter, I fixed the bow tie at his neck gently, just as I used to smooth down the collar of his late mother, Elena, woman whose smile still lingered in my memory like sunlight trapped in glass. A jazz band played softly in the background, blending with bursts of laughter, polite conversation, and the clatter of cutlery. Every table overflowed with white roses, the candlelight glinting off polished silver. I glanced around and spotted Daniel moving from table to table, shaking hands, raising toasts, smiling a smile that tried too hard to cover the void Elena's absence had left behind. At the far end of the room, Cassandra gleamed in her sparkling wedding gown, posing gracefully for photos. Her laughter was flawless, rehearsed, as though she owned the entire evening. I felt a strange tightness in my chest, something uneasy, but brushed it off. The waiters moved swiftly, refilling wine, lifting plates, folding napkins with practiced elegance. An older couple across the table leaned toward me with warm smiles. "How quickly Noah is growing," they remarked. "How old is he now, Margaret?" "He just turned 7, I answered with a soft smile. Time slips through our fingers. I cut a piece of cake and placed it before Noah. He smiled briefly, eyes grateful, before turning his gaze back to the safety of his toy car. Then, abruptly, Noah stopped. His little hands froze, and his round eyes met mine with a seriousness far beyond his years. My chest tightened. He grabbed my hand, icy cold, and whispered with urgency, "Nana, I want to leave right now." I leaned closer, trying to steady my own racing pulse. "What's wrong, my love?" His lips trembled before he spoke again, so softly I had to bend my ear close to hear. "Nana, you didn't look under the table, did you?" The words cut through me like a blade. My breathing faltered, but I tried to keep calm for his sake. I brushed his hair gently and whispered, "It's all right, sweetheart. Let me check." My fingers shook as I lifted the edge of the tablecloth. Beneath the shadows of chair legs and Noah's small shoes swinging nervously, something caught my folded piece of paper, tucked near his chair. With a trembling hand, I picked it up. All around, people laughed and toasted, but my entire world narrowed to me, Noah, and that piece of paper. I unfolded it under the candlelight. Just a few words were scribbled across it, but they knocked the breath from my lungs. Table 8, add shrimp to the child's meal. Double quotes, shrimp. My blood ran cold. Everyone in our family knew Noah's deadly allergy. Even the smallest bite could kill him. Who would write this? Who would want to harm my grandson and my son's wedding day? I squeezed Noah's hand as tightly as I could, feeling his little fingers quiver. Standing abruptly, I ignored the startled looks around me. I wrapped my arms around him as if letting go would mean losing him forever. The music and laughter swelled, but to me, the ballroom had fallen into a suffocating silence. Memories from another life flooded my mind, pulling me away from the glittering wedding hall and back to the years when our family was whole. I once believed my son's house would always be filled with joy, but happiness, like a fragile flame, can be snuffed out in a single gust of wind, leaving scars that never truly heal. I remembered Elena, my first daughter, in the way I remember morning light slipping gently through the curtains. Her smile was soft, warm like coming home. Elena had a calmness about her. She never raised her voice, never gave me cause to worry. Just being near her felt like being wrapped in peace. I can still picture those breezy afternoons in the little suburbs outside Silverwood, when I'd visit Daniel and Elena's modest home. Noah, who had just learned to toddle, would be in the yard chasing a brightly colored ball, his laughter ringing like a tiny bell. Elena would be waiting on the porch with a basket of freshly picked vegetables, her eyes following her son with quiet joy. "Margaret, try the stew I made," she would say proudly, setting a steaming bowl before me. I'd sit with her, sharing simple conversations over food, while Noah clutched an old toy car and pushed it along the floor. But my most vivid yet most painful memory was the night Noah grew terribly sick. His small body burned with fever, his eyelids heavy, his little cries fading into weak whimpers. Alina cradled him, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. "Mom, I'm so scared," she whispered, her voice breaking. I sat with her through that long night, pressing damp cloths against Noah's forehead, trying to soothe both mother and child. "Don't worry, sweetheart. He's strong. He'll get through this," I said, though inside my fear was crushing. We stayed awake until dawn, and when the first light broke through the window, Noah's fever finally subsided. He drifted to sleep in his mother's arms. Alina turned to me, her eyes swollen with tears but carrying a faint, relieved smile. "Thank you, Mom. Without you, I don't know what I would have done." I squeezed her hand tightly, silently promising I'd always be there for her and for Noah. In that moment, I believed their little family would last forever, like a song without an ending. But fate had other plans. One gray afternoon, while I was washing dishes, the phone rang. The cold voice of a police officer crackled through the line. "Mrs. Hale, we regret to inform you there has been an accident." I don't recall hearing the rest. My hands shook so badly that I dropped the plate, the crash echoing through the kitchen. Alina was gone, taken instantly when a truck spun out of control and struck her car on the highway outside Silverwood. Her funeral fell on a day of relentless rain. The sky wept as though it mourned her too. Noah, only 4 years old, sat in my arms, confused, staring at the mourners with wide, innocent eyes. "Grandma, where's my mommy?" he asked softly. I held him closer, swallowing my sobs. "She's in a very beautiful place now, my love," I whispered, though inside, I was broken. Daniel collapsed before the coffin, his shoulders trembling as silent grief consumed him. His eyes were hollow, as though half his soul had been buried with Alina. After that day, my son was never the same. He threw himself into work, leaving before dawn and returning long after Noah had fallen asleep. I knew he was running, trying to fill that cavernous void with endless hours, but in doing so, he left Noah adrift. My poor grandson grew quieter, speaking less, his gaze often far away, as though waiting for his mother to walk back through the door. I became his anchor, taking him to school every morning, sitting by his bed at night, telling him stories of his mother. "Grandma, tell me about Mommy," he would plead, and I would, through a tight throat, recount how she sang him to sleep, how she cut fruit into little shapes just to make him smile. Each story was my attempt to keep Alina alive in his memory and in my heart. Through those days, my adopted daughter, Clara, became a lifeline. With her open heart and gentle ways, she visited often, bringing cookies, coloring books, anything to brighten Noah's days. She treated him like her own little brother, reading to him, guiding his small hands across coloring pages, laughing with him for hours. "Look, Noah, your drawing looks better than mine," she'd tease, her laughter ringing like a chime. But sometimes, I noticed Clara's eyes linger on Daniel when he returned home after long, silent workdays. It was a look that held something deeper than simple affection. I saw it, but I kept quiet, afraid that speaking it aloud might shatter what fragile stability our family still had left. Daniel's house, once filled with light, grew heavy with silence. Yet, thanks to Clara and Noah, a small flame of family warmth remained alive. I clung to that flame, doing everything I could to keep it from going out. But deep inside, I knew both Daniel and I carried wounds that would never heal. Every time I watched Noah sleep, his face bathed in innocence, I saw Elena's reflection there and my heart ached all over again. That afternoon is etched in my memory as vividly as if it happened yesterday. I was sitting in my small living room, listening to the sparrows outside, my heart tangled with unease and hope. It was the first time my son Daniel was bringing Cassandra home to meet me. I tried to open my heart, to see this young woman the way any mother would, someone who might bring happiness back into her son's life after so much grief. But deep down, there was a cold draft in my chest, a shiver I couldn't quite dismiss. Daniel arrived later than usual. I was in the kitchen, preparing the roasted chicken and vegetables Noah loved most, when the front door opened. Daniel stepped in with a glow I hadn't seen in years, his eyes alive, the same way they once shone when he spoke of Alina, his first wife, with uncontainable passion. "Mom," he said, leaning against the doorframe, voice trembling just a little, "I want you to meet someone." I paused, the knife in my hand hovering above the cutting board. "Someone special." I asked, trying to sound calm though my pulse had quickened. Daniel smiled a warm, hopeful smile I thought I'd lost forever. Yes, you're going to love her. I wiped my hands on my apron, hiding the nervous weight pressing against my chest. After Alina, I wasn't sure anyone could ever truly fill that void for Daniel. For Noah, or for me. That evening, Cassandra walked through my door. She wore a light lavender dress that clung elegantly, her hair styled in polished waves, lips painted a soft rose. Her smile was flawless, perhaps a little too flawless, like a performance rehearsed in front of a mirror. It's such a pleasure to finally meet you, Mrs. Hale, she said sweetly, inclining her head with practiced charm. I returned her smile, ushered her inside, and poured her a steaming cup of chamomile tea. What a cozy home, Cassandra remarked, her eyes sweeping across the walls lined with family photographs. Her gaze lingered too long on one frame. Elena, cradling a tiny Noah in her arms. My chest tightened. Dinner was served in as warm an atmosphere as I could manage. The table was set with roasted chicken, a platter of baked pasta, and Noah's favorite fresh mango salad. Daniel sat close beside Cassandra, his eyes drinking her in with every gesture. Mom, he said proudly. Cassandra works in my company's communications department. She's incredible at what she does. Cassandra gave a gentle laugh, serving me a plate with graceful precision. Mrs. Hale, this pasta is wonderful. You'll have to share the recipe with me, she said, her tone dripping with charm. I smiled politely, but unease prickled at the back of my mind. There was something about her laughter, something too polished, too careful, as though she were playing a role. Noah, meanwhile, sat quietly at the head of the table. Normally, he would chatter endlessly about school, but that night he picked at his food, eyes lowered, as if trying to vanish into the wood of his chair. Cassandra leaned toward him, pulled a chocolate bar from her purse, and placed it in front of him with a bright smile. This is for you, Noah. It's delicious, she said, her voice sing-song sweet. Noah's little hands tightened around his fork. Without a word, he turned his head away, refusing even to look at the candy. My heart clenched as I caught a fleeting shadow of fear in his eyes. Daniel frowned, irritation creeping into his voice. Noah, what's wrong with you? Cassandra is giving you a treat. Before he could say more, I intervened quickly. It's nothing, Daniel. He's probably tired. Leave him be. Daniel sighed, let it go, and turned to refill Cassandra's glass of wine, as though eager to smooth over the tension. Clara, my adopted daughter, was at the table as well. She sat across from me, quiet, but I noticed the way her gaze darkened when Cassandra reached under the table and took Daniel's hand. Clara's fingers stiffened around her glass before she lowered her eyes, hiding whatever storm brewed behind them. She didn't say a word, but her silence was louder than any outburst. After dinner, Cassandra insisted on washing the dishes. Please, Mrs. Hale, you deserve to rest, she said cheerfully, rolling up her sleeves before I could protest further. She hummed softly as she worked, cleaning everything with meticulous care until the kitchen gleamed. For a brief moment, I thought, maybe this girl is truly thoughtful. But when I returned to the living room, my hope cracked. Noah was sitting on the floor with his crayons, coloring intently. Cassandra slipped beside him, her tone syrupy sweet. You're such a talented little artist. Noah, let me see what you've drawn. Noah's small hand went limp, the crayon slipping from his grasp. He leaned back sharply, eyes wary, his whole body stiff with distrust, as though she were not a guest in his home, but a threat he instinctively recognized. Clara glanced at me, quickly forcing a smile to cover the awkward silence. What a shy boy, she said in that same sugary voice. But I caught something flicker in her eyes, something sharp, unsettling. Ethan, of course, noticed nothing. He was too busy pouring more wine, sharing light-hearted stories from the office, and laughing far too loudly at every little joke Clara made. By the end of the evening, Ethan was glowing with pride, seeing Clara off at the door with his gaze fixed on her, as though no one else in the world existed. I stood quietly behind, a heaviness pressing against my chest, sensing, though I couldn't yet name it, that something was not quite right. Weeks slipped by, and Clara began weaving herself into our daily lives. One Saturday morning, with the warm Arizona sunlight streaming through the windows, I sat knitting a scarf when she appeared at the door, her face lit with a bright, eager smile. Mrs. Hale, I want to take Noah to the park today. Would that be all right? She asked, her voice bubbling with enthusiasm. I looked at Noah, sitting on the carpet, arranging his wooden blocks, his expression blank, his silence heavy. Of course, I replied, forcing cheer into my voice. I'm sure he'll enjoy it. Deep down, doubt lingered, but Ethan was already at work, and I thought perhaps a little fresh air might help. Clara slipped her hand into Noah's and led him away while I stood at the doorway, my heart heavier than I cared to admit. When they returned hours later, she came in with a triumphant grin. He had such a wonderful time, he wouldn't stop sliding down the slide. And he begged for another ice cream, she chirped. But when I looked at Noah, my heart sank. His freshly pressed blue shirt was smeared with dirt. He sat silently with his toy car, unwilling to say a word about the outing. "Did you have fun, my boy?" I asked softly, crouching to smooth his hair. He only gave a faint nod, turning away from me. I wanted to press him further, but Clara cut in quickly with her ever-sweet tone. "I already told you, Mrs. Hale, he loved it." I nodded, but inside, a small fragment of doubt lodged itself deeper, like the first piece of a puzzle beginning to take shape. Another afternoon, while Ethan was away, Clara arrived unannounced. I was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of chili, when I heard her speaking to Noah in the living room. At first her voice was calm, but then it sharpened into something cold and cutting. "Sit still, Noah. Don't make a mess. You're too old to act like a baby." I froze, knife still in my hand, a chill running through me. By the time I stepped out of the kitchen, her tone had softened again, her smile radiant. "Our Noah is so clever. Look at the tall tower he built," she said brightly, pointing at the blocks. But Noah didn't smile. He pressed his lips together tightly and looked at me with silent pleading in his eyes. My heart clenched. "Yes, he's very skilled," I murmured, forcing a smile, though inside unease grew small, sharp, like a thorn digging deeper each day. Maybe she just isn't used to children, I tried to tell myself. Anyone can be clumsy at first. Noah's 7th birthday remains etched in my memory. My adopted daughter Emma had spent the entire morning baking his favorite chocolate cake. When she carried it out, candles glowing, Noah's eyes lit up for the first time in months. "Aunt Emma, this is my favorite cake," he exclaimed, rushing to wrap his little arms around her. She bent down, kissed his hair, and whispered, "I made it just for you, sweetheart. Eat as much as you like." The warmth in that moment filled my chest. For the first time in a long while, the family flame flickered alive again. Clara stood off to the side, clapping in a stiff, almost reluctant way, her smile thin and weary. Her only gift was a half-hearted pat on Noah's shoulder and a dismissive "Happy birthday, champ." I saw how Noah recoiled ever so slightly, avoiding her eyes. My heart ached, but I bit my tongue. Another day, Ethan took Clara and Noah grocery shopping. I stayed behind. When they returned, Clara's voice carried a sharp edge. Noah dropped a whole bag of candy at checkout, and I had to pay for it. Honestly, what a clumsy boy. Ethan frowned, immediately turning to his son. "Noah, you're too old for this. Be more careful." Noah lowered his head, his small hands knotted together, his eyes searching desperately for mine. I rushed over, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Don't worry, sweetheart, it's just candy." But inside, I was rattled. Why was Clara so quick to anger with a child? Why couldn't she show the gentleness that Alina once had? One afternoon, when I went to pick Noah up from school, his teacher pulled me aside, her voice hushed with concern. "Mrs. Hale, Noah has been very withdrawn lately. He hardly talks. Is something going on at home?" I froze, but forced a reassuring smile. "It's probably just all the changes, Mrs. Carter. Nothing to worry about, yet." On the way home, Noah tugged at my sleeve, his voice trembling. "Grandma, I don't want to go home with Miss Clara." I stopped in my tracks, kneeling to look into his clear, frightened eyes. My heart squeezed tight. "Why would you say that, love? Miss Clara cares about you," I said gently, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew they weren't true. Noah shook his head firmly. "No, Grandma, she doesn't love me." I stroked his hair, trying to soothe him, though inside I felt his words settle like stones in my chest. Emma, who was nearby, had overheard. She turned silently away, her shoulders trembling slightly, as though she were holding back tears. All those little signs, all the tiny cracks I had chosen to ignore, they were no longer fragments. They were forming a picture I could no longer deny. And then came the day of Ethan's wedding. That afternoon, the golden Arizona sun poured through the ballroom windows, flooding everything with light, as if mocking the celebration. I sat at table 8, beside Noah and Emma. Noah was pushing his little red car across the tablecloth, whispering a soft vroom vroom under his breath. My heart swelled with tenderness at the sight. Emma, in a simple beige dress, leaned close to him now and then, slipping him a smile sweet as morning sunlight. "Eat a little more bread, darling," she whispered, breaking off a piece for him. Watching them together filled me with a fragile comfort. For all the sorrow we had endured, Emma and Noah remained the steady fire that warmed my weary soul. Ethan, my son, looked striking in his navy blue suit as he moved between the tables, raising glasses with relatives. His face radiated pure happiness, his brilliant smile seeming to erase the heavy shadow of grief that had followed Elena's death. Watching him, my chest swelled with both pride and sorrow. I wanted to believe, truly believe, that he had found joy again, that Clara, the glittering bride in her jeweled gown, would build a new life with him. But every time my gaze drifted toward Clara laughing too loudly in front of the cameras, her wine glass never leaving her hand, I felt a sharp thorn pressed deeper into my heart. Her smile was dazzling, yet too polished, as though painted onto her face. The jazz band's mellow notes floated through the hall, weaving with the hum of cheerful conversations. Waiters slipped gracefully among the guests, serving trays of crisp crackers, fragrant cheese dip, and carefully arranged shrimp cocktails. I noticed Noah only took a single cracker before quietly pushing the shrimp platter away. I frowned, leaning close to him. "Don't you like it, my darling?" He shook his head quickly, turning his eyes away as if concealing something. I wanted to press him, but before I could, a cousin's cheerful voice interrupted. "And Noah is such a good boy, Margaret. Look how big he's gotten." I forced a smile. "He's grown into quite the little gentleman." But inside, unease curled in my stomach. Noah had never turned down food in such a strange, guarded way. Across the room, I caught Clara's eyes fixed on our table. For just a second, her smile faltered, tightening unnaturally, before she turned back to clink glasses with another guest. My pulse quickened, but I told myself I was imagining things. And then it happened. Noah, still pushing his red toy car across the table, shoved it a little too hard. It tumbled to the floor. He bent quickly to retrieve it, but froze mid-motion, his eyes widening in terror at something beneath the table. I leaned down, my voice steady, though my heart lurched. "What is it, sweetheart?" His small hands trembled as he pulled out a folded slip of paper. His face had gone pale. Clutching my hand, he whispered urgently, "Grandma, let's go. Please, let's go now." My heart thundered so violently it seemed ready to leap out of my chest. "What's wrong, my boy?" Noah's frightened eyes met mine. His lips trembled as he asked, "You didn't look under the table, did you?" A chill sliced through me. With shaking hands, I lifted the white tablecloth and scanned the shadows. The paper he had found lay just beneath his chair, so small, so ordinary, and yet it radiated menace. I picked it up, my fingers unsteady, and unfolded it beneath the dim candlelight. My breath caught, the scrawled words burned into me. "Table 8, add shrimp to the child's plate." A simple line, yet it electrified me with horror. I crushed the note in my hand as the laughter, the music, and the bright chatter around me seemed to collapse into a suffocating silence. Clara, radiant in her bridal gown, still raised her glass in the corner, smiling as if she had not a care in the world. Ethan posed for photos with his colleagues, his joy oblivious to the nightmare coiling around us. But for me, everything in that ballroom became a Focaccia glittering curtain, hiding a monstrous truth. Someone had tried to kill Noah. My precious grandson, whose life could be ended by a single bite of shrimp, had been targeted in the middle of his father's wedding. I turned quickly to Emma, my adopted daughter, seated beside him. She had already noticed my expression. Her eyes brimmed with worry. "Stay with Noah. Don't let him out of your sight," I whispered, my voice quivering despite my effort to sound calm. Emma nodded firmly, wrapping her arms around him like a shield. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice low, trembling. I shook my head, unable to answer. I didn't know myself. All I knew was that I had to act. My legs felt like lead as I rose, but my heart pounded like a war drum. Out in the hallway, a cluster of waiters stood chatting near the bar, their laughter jarringly out of place against the storm raging inside me. I spotted one of them, Daniel, the young man who had served our table earlier. His boyish face was usually kind, but I couldn't see kindness now. All I saw was danger. I marched straight to him and shoved the crumpled note in his face. "Do you know who gave you this?" My voice came out low but sharp, trembling with fury. Daniel's smile vanished instantly. His eyes widened, his skin drained of color. "God, this is mine," he stammered, reaching as though to snatch it back. I dropped it. "I didn't mean to. Who sent it?" I demanded, my voice cracking with rage. A woman, he whispered, panic shaking his words. She just handed me the paper and told me to give it to the chef. I don't know her name, I swear. I never read what it said. His fear was genuine, but it only twisted the knife in my chest. You don't understand, I hissed. Stepping closer, my body trembling with both terror and fury. My grandson is deathly allergic to shrimp. One bite could kill him. Daniel stumbled back, horrified. Ma'am, I swear, I didn't know. I just followed instructions. I had no idea. His voice cracked, as though he too was trapped in this nightmare. The other waiters had gone quiet, whispering, casting uneasy glances our way. I clenched the paper so tightly it burned against my palm. I wanted to scream, to shatter every crystal glass in that room, but I couldn't. Noah was waiting. He needed me, calm, sharp, steady. Inside the ballroom, the master of ceremonies cheerfully announced the arrival of the main course. His voice was like a cruel countdown, reminding me that if I hesitated, the next plate brought to our table could be Noah's death sentence. I drew in a shaky breath, trying to steady the storm raging inside me. My hands trembled, but I knew I couldn't stay silent, not tonight. If I let this moment pass, I would never forgive myself. Clutching the paper in my fist, the irrefutable proof of something dry, stepped back into the glittering ballroom. The chandeliers still bathed the hall in golden light. The jazz band played cheerfully, and guests laughed as waiters glided between tables with trays of roasted lamb and rich gravies. But to me, it was nothing but a hollow performance, a masquerade hiding cruelty. My eyes fell on little Henry, seated beside Sophie. His wide, fearful eyes clung to me like I was his last anchor in the middle of a storm. My chest tightened as I reached for his small hand. His fingers trembled in my palm, fragile but trusting. That trust gave me strength, and then, as if something greater than me pushed me forward, I rose abruptly. My chair scraped the polished floor, and my voice cut through the music and chatter like a blade. One moment, please, before anyone touches their plates. There is something that must be addressed. The room froze, forks clattered against porcelain, glasses stopped midair. At table 9, where I stood with Henry by my side and Sophie watching with quiet fire in her eyes, all attention sharpened like 1,000 arrows aimed at me. The whispers died away. The only sound left was my heartbeat pounding like a drum in my chest. I lifted the folded note high, my voice cold but steady. Who wrote this message, asking that shrimp be added to the meal of the child seated at table 9? A ripple of murmurs spread across the hall. Guests exchanged bewildered glances. Some shook their heads, frowning in confusion. But Henry's gaze never wavered from me, pleading silently for protection. From across the room, my son Adrian hurried over. His smile faltered the moment he saw my expression. "Mother, what's wrong?" he asked, alarm etched across his face. I slid the paper toward him, my voice clipped and sharp. "Read it." He scanned the words, his face draining of color. His hand shook as he looked at me, then at Henry. "What is this supposed to mean?" he whispered hoarsely. Before I could answer, Isabel the bride swept toward us in her silk gown, her expression painted with feigned innocence. "What's going on here? Some kind of tasteless prank?" Her voice was soft, but I caught a flicker of panic in her eyes. I met her gaze head-on, fury tightening my throat. "My grandson has a deadly allergy to shrimp," I declared, my voice trembling with restrained rage. "This," I pointed to the note, "is not a prank. This is attempted murder." The words cracked through the hall like thunder. Gasps erupted. Guests stared in shock, some whispering, others frozen in disbelief. Isabel gave a brittle laugh, her composure straining. "Mrs. Whitmore, really, there's no name on this note. Are we going to take the word of a frightened child?" she mocked, her tone sugar-coated but venomous. Her audacity scorched through me. But before I could reply, Sophie rose from her chair. She clutched Henry to her chest, her eyes burning with fury. "Enough, Isabel." Her voice cut through the silence like broken glass. The next moment, her hand struck Isabel's cheek with a sharp crack that echoed in the hushed hall. Gasps rippled. Even I froze. Isabel staggered back, clutching her face, then turned to Adrian with crocodile tears welling in her eyes. "You see, she's unhinged. She's attacking me for no reason." But Sophie didn't flinch. Her fists clenched, her voice quivered with raw fury. "The only dangerous one here is you. You tried to harm an innocent child on your own wedding day." A new wave of murmurs rippled across the ballroom, eyes shifting toward Isabel. Her flawless mask faltered, her smile slipping as doubt seeped into the crowd. Adrian stood frozen, torn between his wife and his family, his voice weak. "Sophie, please calm down." But I saw uncertainty in his eyes. The tide was turning. Guests whispered louder, casting glances at Isabel, then at Henry, trembling in Sophie's arms. Isabel tried to gather herself, her voice shrill and defensive. "This is slander. Clearly someone planted that note to ruin our wedding." I slammed my palm against the table, rattling glasses and silencing the band midst. My voice was like ice. "Enough lies. Marcus, come here." The young waiter crept forward from the shadows, pale and shaking. His eyes darted nervously before landing on the note. "Yes, ma'am," he stammered. "That's the paper I was given. A woman from another table handed it to me. I dropped it by mistake." The room buzzed with shock. All eyes swung back to Isabel. Before she could defend herself again, a frail voice broke from behind her. "It wasn't me who wrote it." Her younger sister, Clara, barely 18, stood trembling. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "Isabel gave me that paper. She told me to hand it to the waiter. I didn't know what it said, I swear." Gasps erupted. The ballroom tilted into stunned silence. Isabel spun on her sister, her face twisted with fury. "Shut up, Clara. How dare you spread lies against me?" But Clara shook her head, sobbing harder. "I'm not lying. You asked me to. I only did what you told me." Her broken confession sliced through the air like a dagger, leaving Isabel's carefully constructed facade crumbling before everyone's eyes. An older cousin shook his head, his voice trembling with disgust. To think someone could stoop so low to target an innocent child. The ballroom was in chaos, voices overlapping in shocked whispers, but Sophie stepped forward, clutching Henry tightly in her arms. Her voice rang out, cold and sharp. "If you keep denying it, Isabel, we can ask the hotel to pull the security footage. One look at the cameras will clear this up." Her words dropped like a stone into still water, sending ripples of panic across the room. Isabel's face drained of color, her lips pressed into a thin line as her eyes darted around, desperate for an escape route, but there was none left. Her silence was louder than any confession. Adrian's hand trembled on Henry's shoulder as he turned to the woman he had just vowed to love. "Isabel," his voice cracked with desperation, "tell me the truth. Is it real? Did you do this?" For a moment she stood frozen, then forced a brittle smile that collapsed almost as quickly as it formed. You don't believe me? This is their scheme, Adrian. I did nothing." Her voice wavered, thin and hollow, like a flame about to flicker out. I stared at her, my chest heavy with betrayal. The woman I once welcomed as a daughter-in-law now stood exposed as a stranger, a danger I hadn't seen until it was nearly too late. Sophie rested her trembling hand on Adrian's shoulder, her voice steady but ragged with rage. "Henry almost died because of this woman," Isabel snapped, her mask crumbling. "Shut up. You're nothing but a jealous outsider." Sophie didn't flinch, her eyes, glistening with fury, locked on Isabel. "Jealous? Look into this child's eyes and swear you didn't try to hurt him." Henry clung to me, his little hand squeezing mine so tightly it ached, his body shivering, as though afraid the nightmare would drag him under again. All around us, guests began rising from their seats. The festive glow of the ballroom was gone. In its place, outrage crackled like electricity. Mr. Davenport, one of our elders, slammed his fist against the table. "This is beyond shameful. Such cruelty cannot be ignored." Murmurs swelled into a storm. Faces turned on Isabel with disdain, voices whispering condemnation. Then Adrian's voice tore through the noise, raw and broken. "Henry is my son. You tried to kill my son on our wedding day." His words pierced Isabel like a blade. She burst into tears, but even from where I stood, I knew those weren't tears of regret. They were the tears of someone exposed. I laid the crumpled note flat on the table, my voice rising above the crowd, hard and unyielding. "Anyone who dares harm my grandson forfeits the right to be called family." Isabel's eyes flared with a last flicker of defiance, but the fight was gone. Defeat clouded her gaze. Two members of hotel security stepped forward. Their tone was calm but firm. "Ma'am, you'll need to come with us." Isabel backed away, scanning the room for support, but none came. Guests shook their heads in disgust, pushing their half-full glasses aside. "Unthinkable," someone whispered. "To endanger a child, she's monstrous," another muttered. Adrian crumpled where he stood, sinking to his knees before Henry. His voice was shredded with grief. "Son, forgive me. Forgive me for not protecting you." Tears streamed down his face, his hands trembling as he reached for the boy. I bent to lift him, my own eyes stinging. and pressed his shoulders firmly. "We stopped her in time," I said in a voice low but steady. "This false happiness ends here." Tonight, I watched Isabel, her white gown trailing like a ghost behind her, as she was escorted out under a hail of contemptuous stares. And in that moment, I knew she had never been, and would never be part of this family. The days after the ruined wedding felt like wandering through the ashes of a firestorm. Our home was heavy with silence, wounds still raw, unanswered questions circling like vultures. News of what had happened spread quickly through neighbors' gossip, relatives' phone calls, even whispers in distant towns. Some blamed Adrian for trusting her blindly. Others mourned for Henry, the little boy who had narrowly escaped tragedy. For me, every ringing phone was a fresh reminder of the nightmare. Adrian was no longer the radiant groom in his navy suit. Guilt weighed on him, hollowing his once bright smile. He drove Henry to and from school each day in silence, eyes shadowed with pain. Isabel's name was never spoken again in our house, as if banishing it could cleanse the poison she had left behind. I watched my son with a heavy heart, knowing he needed time to mend, to forgive himself for being deceived. I didn't blame him. Love blinds us all. But one thing was certain. We would not stay broken. We would rise, scarred but stronger. From the wreckage she left behind, I continued to care for Ethan the way I had since Sophie walked away. I cooked his favorite meals, creamy pasta, soft custards, trying to give him some sense of safety again. But the truth was, it wasn't me who truly healed Ethan's little heart. It was Isabella, my adopted daughter. Every morning before school, Isabella carefully packed Ethan's lunch, always making sure to avoid shrimp or anything that could hurt him. She'd slip in a small note for his teacher about his allergy, always with a cheerful crayon drawing that made him smile. "Aunt Bella, you draw the best," Ethan would exclaim, his face lighting up as if a piece of his childhood innocence had been restored. Every afternoon, Isabella would take him to Riverside Park. I often stood back and saw her teaching him how to fly a kite, showing him how to hold the string so it soared higher. Once, when Ethan slipped off the slide, Isabella rushed to scoop him up, brushed the dust from his clothes, and whispered, "It's all right, sweetheart. I'm right here." His laugh rang through the air, a sound I thought I'd never hear again, soothing my weary soul. I looked at Isabella with endless gratitude. She wasn't just a sister figure to Ethan, she had become like a second mother, gently filling the hollow space Sophie had left behind. One night, when Ethan burned with fever, Isabella stayed awake by his side. She sat on a chair all night, pressing cool cloths to his forehead, while softly telling him the tale of a little sparrow that braved a storm. I stood quietly at the door, watching. Across the room, I caught Daniel's gaze fixed on Isabella, his eyes filled with remorse, gratitude, and an awakening he had long ignored. I said nothing, just stepped away, silently allowing them space, and for the first time in a long while, I dared to hope there might be light at the end of our dark tunnel. During one rare evening when we all sat down to eat the warm pasta I'd made, Ethan suddenly looked up at Isabella. His clear voice broke the silence. "I want Aunt Bella to be my mommy." The whole table froze. Isabella flushed, staring down at her spoon, too shy to speak. Daniel's eyes brimmed with tears, struck by the depth of his son's innocent words. I reached over, placed a hand on my son's shoulder, and said gently, "Happiness, Daniel, doesn't come from glittering ceremonies. It comes from a heart that knows how to love sincerely." Daniel looked at me, then at Isabella, and in that moment, a spark of hope shone in his eyes. Time passed, and Sophie faded completely from our lives like a storm that had blown past. Ethan became a bright, joyful child again, never far from Isabella's side, clutching his red toy car and the little drawing she had made for him. I would watch him run across the yard, my heart swelling with both relief and sorrow for everything he had endured. Then one afternoon, Daniel held Isabella's hand, standing before me in the living room. His voice shook, but his words were firm. "Mom, I know I failed. I was blind. I put Ethan at risk. But this time, I don't want to let go of the one person who has stood by us through everything." Isabella blushed, lowering her head, but her lips curved into a radiant smile. Tears slipped down my cheeks as I whispered, "My son, all I've ever wanted is for you and Ethan to be truly happy." That night, after Ethan drifted to sleep, I sat by the window, watching the silver moon spill its light across Maplewood Street. It felt like a gentle reminder that no matter how dark the days had been, light always finds its way through. I whispered to myself, Family isn't always made of blood. Sometimes, it's chosen with love and courage. The grim memories of that disastrous wedding felt like a distant shadow. A new chapter had begun, one woven with love, healing, and strength. Out in the yard, the kite Ethan and Isabella had flown still swayed in the breeze, a symbol of resilience. I knew then that even if old wounds never fully healed, together, with love as our anchor, we would carry on. And from it all, I learned something I wish everyone would remember. Life brings losses you can't undo, betrayals that scar the heart, but sincere love will always be the light that guides us forward. Family is built not only with blood, but with choices, sacrifice, and unwavering care. Sometimes, it only takes a small act of kindness to save someone's world. Sometimes, courage is what pulls us out of nights that feel endless. The names and places in this story have been changed to protect identities. We don't share this to judge, but in the hope that someone listening might pause, reflect, and find strength in their own struggles. And I ask you, if you were in my place, what would you have done? Chosen silence for the sake of peace, or spoken up to reclaim your voice? Every story can be a candle lighting the path for another soul.